Her family sold her as useless until a lonely mountain man built her a cabin and called her wife. The sun hangs merciless, a blistering orb above the town square, turning wooden planks into a furnace and casting every face in harsh light. Dust swirls in lazy golden spirals, sticking to the hems of skirts, the brims of hats, and the strands of hair that cling to her dampened brow. She stands atop the rough-hewn platform, the boards creaking under her weight, shoulders rigid, spine straight, yet trembling. Her dress, once soft and faded to gray, now smells of sweat, pine sap, and smoke from distant chimneys. Around her, the air vibrates with murmurs, whispers, and the occasional jeer. Her family, gaunt figures hollowed by hunger and misfortune, stand to the side, their voices tight with desperation. They haggle over her like livestock, lips curling in greed and shame. "Worth no more than 50, one whispers, eyes darting to the coins clutched in another's palm. "She'll eat dust for us or die on the road," another spits, and the words cut sharper than the auctioneer's whip, leaving invisible bruises across her skin. Her hands curl into fists at her sides, nails digging into calloused palms, but she does not scream. She does not flinch. Her eyes, large and dark, haunted yet unyielding, scan the crowd, registering the judgment, the pity, the revulsion, but never the surrender. Men leer, spitting into the dust, tongues heavy with desire or scorn. Women shift uncomfortably, skirts brushing the dirt, eyes lowered or darting away, some shielding children from the rawness of the spectacle. The platform is more than wood. It is a stage for injustice, for human barter, for the cruel arithmetic of survival. Each breath she draws tastes of sand, sweat, and fear, yet the rhythm of her heartbeat, fast, wild, defiant, speaks of something no coin could ever measure. Above the clamor, the camera's eye drifts to the ridge beyond the square, where a lone figure leans against a jagged pine. His beard, tangled and knotted like the brambles he tames in solitude, catches the sun in streaks of brown and gray. He watches, silent and unmoved, a mountain carved into human form. His eyes narrow, not with judgment, but recognition. A subtle, almost imperceptible acknowledgement of strength buried beneath fragility. The wind tousles his hair. The hawk overhead screams and circles, wings slicing the blue sky like knives. He feels the pull of her presence, not as beauty but as fire, as endurance, as a hidden voice calling out through the dust and clamor. Back on the platform, the auctioneer's gavel strikes wood, echoing in the still, thick air. "Sold!" Coins clink and rattle, some tossed with careless cruelty, others with hesitation and moral weight. Her stomach twists, a rope of dread tightening as the town's laughter and murmurs wash over her. Then a hand rises. A different hand, strong, deliberate, holding coins that shine even in the dusty haze. The sound of metal meeting metal carries across the square, final and irrevocable. She is no longer the commodity of her family or their shame. She is claimed, in silence and solemnity, by someone who sees more than what others discard. The platform descends under her feet. Each step is measured, cautious, the boards creaking with the weight of humiliation and newfound possibility. She feels the eyes of townsfolk burning into her back, some with envy, some with contempt. The mountain man waits at the edge of the square, a silent sentinel, his gaze steady, unwavering. The world outside, the shouts, the deals, the cruelty, recedes like a tide pulling away from the shore. Dust churns beneath their boots as they leave the square, weaving through narrow streets where the wind carries scraps of conversation and the scent of smoke, horse sweat, and earth. The town's wooden structures lean and groan under the heat, casting elongated shadows that stretch like fingers toward the horizon. Ahead, jagged cliffs rise from the valley floor, a fortress of stone and pine. Nestled among them, half hidden, stands a cabin, rough-hewn logs stacked with care. Smoke curling lazily from the chimney, the scent of pine sap and hearth fire greeting them like an embrace. She steps inside, hesitancy and wonder warring in every movement. Her fingers brush against the rough wood walls, feeling the scars of the mountain man's solitude, the labor of his isolation. He watches her without speaking, posture rigid, eyes guarded, yet something softens at the corners, a quiet recognition of shared burdens, of life's cruel debts, of survival. The wind rattles through pines outside, carrying the smell of wet earth and distant storms. Whispering secrets neither has yet learned to voice, they stand together in the doorway. Silhouettes against the dying sunlight, two figures shaped by abandonment and silence. No words are exchanged. None are needed. Their eyes meet, and in the unspoken glance lies acknowledgement, suspicion, fear, and the first fragile tendrils of trust. The world beyond the valley's edge ceases to exist, reduced to rumor and dust. Only this cabin, this moment, this quiet and raw possibility remains, a tentative promise of life, of safety, and perhaps, one day, of belonging. The first night approaches. The wind hums through the trees, carrying with it the taste of pine and the echo of the square. Outside, shadows lengthen, and a lone hawk settles atop a ridge, watching, patient and eternal. Inside, the cabin waits, warm and silent. And in that silence, two souls, each weighed down by isolation and sorrow, begin the slow, delicate work of recognizing one another, not as captor and captive, not as man and woman, but as human beings on the edge of an uncharted future. The cabin emerged from the jagged cliffs like a stubborn survivor. Rough-hewn logs stacked with deliberate care, smoke curling in lazy spirals from a crooked chimney. The river below flowed silent and dark, winding through the valley like a shadow of stillness. The air smelled of pine sap and fire smoke, a scent that pressed into her lungs and offered a fleeting promise of safety, of sanctuary, though her heart beat wary beneath her ribs. Each step she took on the creaking wooden floor was measured, tentative, as though the cabin itself might judge her worth. He gave her no words, no gentle welcoming speech, only the quiet allowance of existence. A loaf of bread appeared on the table, warm from the oven, steam curling like wisps of patience. Blankets were folded at the hearth, their coarse wool rough against trembling hands. Every gift was silent, each gesture a covenant without uttering a single syllable. She understood that space was the currency here, and he paid it generously, though the distance between them remained vast, like a canyon neither dared to cross. Her fingers traced the rough walls, fingertips discovering splinters, knots, and the deep grooves left by rope burns and past work. The scratches in the floorboards told stories she could almost hear, the long nights of solitude, the silence broken only by the wind, the footsteps of wolves on distant ridges. Each mark was a testimony, and she felt herself part of it, a guest in a world built from loneliness and endurance. Outside, clouds gathered, bruising the sky with gray and violet. A hawk arced across the storm-darkened horizon, screaming its raw, unflinching cry. She shivered, not from cold alone, but from the memory of the auction square, the jeers, the feeling of being bought and sold. Nights lengthened, and the wind rattled the cabin's frame as if some restless spirit prowled its edges. Yet inside, the fire's warmth offered refuge. They moved around each other in silence, she fetching water, he stacking wood, their motions synchronized without speaking, like two notes vibrating in the same chord. Every small action became profound. He hung a coat over her shoulders when she shivered too long by the hearth. She left the bread untouched for him, and he ate it with quiet appreciation, eyes darkened by unshed emotions. Each gesture, unremarkable in isolation, became laden with meaning. A loaf of bread as sustenance, a coat as protection, the crackle of fire as heartbeat and witness. Slowly, imperceptibly, she began to see him not as captor nor savior, but as another wounded soul moving cautiously through life's wilderness. Her exploration of the cabin revealed more than walls and floorboards. It revealed the story of him. A hat hung askew on a peg, frayed and sweat-stained from long treks. A chair bore the impression of someone who had sat too long, thinking too hard, haunted by memory. A small window framed the world beyond, each storm-laden gust rattling it like a warning. She pressed her hand against the cold glass, feeling the pulse of wind, the rhythm of rain soon to fall, the quiet loneliness that had birthed this haven. Evening descended, slow and red, stretching shadows long across the room. She wrapped herself in the coarse blankets, chest rising and falling with a rhythm she thought the night would steal from her. The fire painted flickering patterns on her face, illuminating scars of past suffering she had not yet shown to anyone. He stood at the doorway, silhouette carved against the dimming light, eyes shadowed, torn between the pull of attachment and the wariness of a world that had shown him cruelty at every turn. The wind's howl threaded through the trees, a haunting lullaby, and the cabin trembled slightly beneath it, as though the structure itself was alive, breathing with their tension. She felt it too, a pull in her chest, a fluttering between fear and hope. Her eyelids drooped, heavy with exhaustion and the weight of trust slowly taking root. She dared not speak. The moment held too much, fragile as glass, and words might shatter it. Outside, the hawk vanished into the gathering storm, leaving only the whisper of wind and the scent of pine. The fire crackled, echoing the quiet stirrings of something new and dangerous. A fragile, flickering trust, slow as wildfire through dry grass.
Both aware of it, both wary.
They occupied the same space, yet separate. An invisible thread binding them, trembling under the weight of fear, hope, and the faintest stirrings of connection. Night deepened. And with it, a silence that was not empty, but full of what could be, of what might be, of two souls beginning to acknowledge one another. The cabin held them, not as captor and captive, not as master and possession, but as two people learning, inch by inch, the strange, terrifying, luminous truth of coexistence. Winter arrived with the quiet cruelty of a predator. Frost crept along the corners of the cabin, tracing icy veins across window panes and painting their breaths in ghostly white puffs that vanished as quickly as they appeared. The fire crackled, small and stubborn against the gnawing chill, throwing flickering shadows across the rough walls and floorboards. She moved slowly, tending small chores, sweeping snow from the doorframe, stacking firewood, kneading dough on the rough table, her hands red and raw, skin peeling under the cold. He sat nearby, sharpening axes with meticulous rhythmic strokes, metal ringing against stone, a sound both menacing and comforting in its constancy. His face was shadowed, eyes distant, jaw tight as he worked. But tonight there was a subtle tremor in his hands, a quiet acknowledgement of her presence that he could not voice. Conversation was minimal, as always, but the world outside pressed closer through the frost-laden walls, threatening intrusion with every gust of wind and whisper of snow. Then it happened. A misstep. She slipped on a slick patch near the hearth, a soft cry catching in her throat as her knee struck the rough floor. He was at her side in an instant, his arms steady, strong, yet trembling as he lifted her and brushed away the tears she had tried to hide. His touch was gentle, precise, not commanding, not pitying, just present. The fire's glow painted his features in stark relief, and in that light she saw the lines of a life carved by sorrow and solitude. Words remained scarce. Instead, confessions poured forth in gestures and silences. The way he offered her a cup of steaming broth, the careful manner in which he tended small scrapes on her hands, the soft hum of a harmonica he had never played for anyone before. The tune was melancholy, tentative, carrying the echoes of nights spent alone, of grief too heavy to name. She listened, allowing the melody to fill the space between them, understanding more in its pauses than any conversation could convey. Piece by piece, he revealed his past. A sister lost to the avarice of men, her memory etched into every corner of the cabin. A homestead burned to cinders, leaving nothing but ash and bitterness. A heart hardened by grief and isolation, yet capable of tenderness that trembled beneath his stoic exterior. She said little in return, but her gaze was intense, telling stories of betrayals endured, chains she refused to bring into this fragile refuge. In the quiet, they began to measure the weight of each other's scars, the distance between wounds, and the spaces where trust might one day take root. Outside, coyotes called across snow-dusted hills, their cries echoing in the valleys and bouncing off frozen rocks. Each shadow that flickered across the cabin's walls seemed to hold imagined threats, every crack in the frame a potential intrusion. The wind rattled the shutters, carrying the scent of pine. Ice and distant predators, but inside, the hearth's warmth cocooned them, a fragile barrier against the wilderness. Gradually, proximity became inevitable. Their hands brushed while moving dishes from the table. He offered her a fur-lined cloak, fingers grazing her wrist, hearts thumping louder than the wind outside. A glance, a subtle shift of weight closer to one another, and the spark of forbidden intimacy flared briefly. Hesitant, electric, unnamed. Neither spoke, neither moved too boldly. And yet the air between them vibrated with acknowledgement of desire, trust, and the tentative beginnings of love. She leaned against the hearth, and he stayed near, watching her movements, the rise and fall of her chest, the tremble of her shoulders as exhaustion and fear intertwined. When she finally lay down on the rough blankets near the fire, he remained by her side, vigilant, a silent guardian in the long night. Her head rested against his chest, warm, steady, the firelight casting a halo around them. She felt the weight of his heartbeat, strong and unyielding, yet cautious, matching her own. The night deepened, blanketing the valley outside in snow and shadow. The cabin creaked softly, the fire murmured, and the wind sighed through the pines. In this fragile cocoon, trust took its first tentative form, delicate and trembling as a fledgling bird's wing. Desire, too, hovered at the edges, unspoken but undeniable, a seed planted in the fertile soil of shared vulnerability and quiet endurance. And as she drifted into sleep, wrapped in coarse blankets and the steady rhythm of his chest beneath her cheek, the first chapter of their true connection was sealed, not with words, but with presence, with the careful acknowledgement of each other's pain, strength, and the unspoken promise that, in this cabin, no past would define them, and perhaps, together, they might find a future. Spring arrived in the valley with trembling fingers, coaxing green from frozen soil, coaxing wildflowers through thawed earth in colors sharp against the pale remnants of snow. Birds returned to skeletal trees, and the river's surface glittered under a timid sun. For a moment it seemed the world exhaled, and the cabin, perched among jagged cliffs, breathed with it. But the season's renewal carried a shadow, an unexpected intruder who would tear the fragile serenity into pieces. A rider appeared at the edge of the valley, horse hooves striking the dirt with authority, sending plumes of dust into the golden air. The stranger's presence was immediate, sharp, a bounty hunter with eyes like polished flint, fingers brushing the rifle that hung across his back. Whispers stirred in the underbrush. She was a stolen prize, a woman taken from her rightful place, a claim to be corrected with iron and lead. The mountain man's jaw tightened, muscles coiled like rope wound tight, ready to spring. The cabin, once a haven of solitude, transformed into a fortress under siege. The heroine's fingers curled around a kitchen knife, knuckles white against the carved wooden handle. Her chest heaved with tremulous defiance, eyes wide and steady, and every step toward the open doorway seemed to defy her past. Dust spiraled beneath the rider's approach, rising like smoke over the valley floor. A single gunshot split the air, sharp as a whip crack, and the world erupted into chaos. They dove for cover behind jagged rocks and the hollowed banks of the river. Her hand brushed against his, a fleeting contact that sent a pulse through them both, reminding them of their tether, even amidst danger. Every glance was loaded, every drumbeat against the wind's roar. The bounty hunter's shadowed eyes scanned the terrain, calculating, unyielding, and yet they moved as one through hidden hollows, two bodies weaving through snowmelt streams and thorned bushes. Survival instinct as natural as breathing. The wind carried the scent of horses and gunpowder, mingled with the sharp tang of wildflowers crushed beneath rapid steps. Their breaths came fast, clouding in the chilly spring air, mingling with the rising dust and scent of pine resin. They stumbled through the valley, backs brushing, hands occasionally gripping for balance or security, and in the shared rhythm of escape. Something profound stirred, awareness of life, trust, and the tenuous thread of love between them. Hours passed in tense pursuit, the valley echoing with the gunshots' remnants and the pounding of hooves. Shadows lengthened as evening bled into night, painting cliffs in violet and gold. At last, battered, mud-smeared, hearts racing and clothes torn, they paused in a hidden hollow, chest to chest, knees muddy, breaths ragged but hearts still beating in tandem. The valley was scarred by human intrusion. Once serene streams now churned with evidence of survival and threat. He turned to her, voice low, rough as gravel yet soft with a tenderness reserved for no one else. "Wife," he said. The word carried on the wind like a vow, an acknowledgement, a claim of something deeper than possession. A bond forged in the crucible of fear and trust, defying society's judgment and whispered taboos. Her eyes, glistening from exertion and adrenaline, met his, and in the quiet that followed, they recognized the truth of their connection. Love was not consented to by the world. It was carved from moments like this, raw, dangerous, and undeniable. They moved carefully back toward the cabin, each glance a silent conversation, each step a testament to the closeness forged in shared peril. Night fell fully, stars spilling across the sky like scattered embers, and the valley, though marred by human violence, gleamed under the celestial light, reflecting hope as much as scars. They stood together, shoulders brushing, watching distant mountains echo the rhythm of their breath. Words were unnecessary. Their presence spoke volumes of survival, of trust, of a love that existed beyond judgment and time. The cabin's silhouette rose against the night sky, smoke from the hearth curling like an offering to the gods of survival and quiet victory. Inside, blankets awaited, firelight promising warmth and shelter, but outside, under the vast expanse of stars, they lingered. Each inhalation of the cold night air carried the memory of pursuit, the scent of wildflowers and dust, the pulse of shared heartbeat. And as they finally stepped inside, the mountain man kept his hand near hers, thumb brushing her knuckles, both aware that the world beyond these cliffs would never understand, nor need to. For the first time, the valley felt like theirs, not a prison, nor a sanctuary, but a shared landscape where danger and desire intertwined, where love could grow stubborn and wild, like the spring flowers pushing through thawed soil. They had emerged alive, scarred but unbroken, and in that survival, a deeper connection was forged, one that neither storm nor bounty hunter could sever. Summer arrived like a hammer, relentless and unyielding. The sun scorched the valley, baking the earth into cracked, thirsty soil. Pines and scrub whispered dryly in the heat, needles snapping underfoot like brittle bones. The forest, once a sanctuary of shade and shadow, crackled under the unforgiving gaze of the sky, and the river's flow slowed to a ribbon of molten reflection. Within this fragile equilibrium, the cabin stood stubborn, a bastion of solitude and hard-won safety. But the air was thick with the scent of tinder and impending disaster. It began small, a wisp of smoke at the far edge of the ridge. Then the fire roared, a living thing, consuming dry brush, leaping from tree to tree with a hunger that mirrored the turmoil in their hearts. Sparks danced like fireflies gone mad, carried by the wind, landing on the cabin roof with soft, terrifying taps. The heat pressed in from all sides, heavy and suffocating, and the crackle of flames echoed the tension tightening in their chests. They fought with what they could, shovels scraping at dirt to smother the advancing blaze. Blankets flung over smoldering brush, water poured from pails until their arms burned with effort. The wind shifted unexpectedly, and the fire surged, an unstoppable beast that mirrored every unspoken fear, longing, and rage simmering beneath their skin. Each glance they shared carried the weight of silent understanding. One misstep, one hesitation, and everything they had built could vanish in smoke and ash. In a sudden, violent surge, a burning timber crashed through the cabin's side, toppling onto the floor with a deafening crack. She screamed, trapped beneath the weight of splintered wood, smoke stinging her eyes, fear clawing at her throat. Time slowed, each second stretching into an eternity as heat licked her legs and the cabin groaned in protest. He was there instantly, arms strong and unflinching, lifting her with a combination of raw strength and desperate precision. Pain seared through her skin where embers fell, but his presence was salvation, his touch a tether to life. Her chest heaved as he steadied her, face illuminated by the firelight, eyes shadowed yet intense. Every motion carried both urgency and care. He brushed ash from her hair, hands trembling only slightly, as though the fear for her life outweighed his own. "You breathe too loud for me to ignore," he muttered, voice rough, gravel and smoke, yet layered with a tenderness she had not dared hope for. The words, simple and stark, carried the weight of years spent in isolation, a lifetime of unspoken emotions finally finding form. The fire raged around them, but within the cabin's fragile walls, a clarity emerged. Vulnerability met heroism in their intertwined forms. The heroine, trembling yet alive, and the man, steadfast yet unmasked in the heat of danger. Every touch, every glance, every hurried movement spoke louder than any conversation could. Each moment a testament to survival and the fragile, intense bond forged in isolation and peril. Outside, the world beyond the valley ceased to matter. Townsfolk, laws, judgment, and whispers all receded into insignificance, muted by the roar of flames and the suffocating heat. The wind carried embers skyward, smoke curling like ribbons into twilight, and in that haze, life's fleetingness pressed against them, reminding them of the urgency of love, of the value of trust, of the need to claim moments before they were gone. They moved together, coordinating silently, instinctively, each aware of the other's weight and rhythm. Hands brushed, arms locked around splintered wood, eyes meeting in fleeting pauses where the chaos momentarily fell away. They were alive, burning, breathing, desperate, but together. And in that togetherness, the bond forged in months of solitude, in whispered glances, in unspoken vulnerability, was tempered in the fire, indestructible and real. Finally, the blaze began to retreat, the wind shifting once more, allowing them to collapse onto the scorched earth. Faces smeared with ash, hair damp with sweat. Their chests rose and fell in tandem, eyes locked not on the destruction but on one another. In the glow of dying embers, in the quiet after the storm of fire, they understood. Life was fleeting, love was urgent, and whatever else waited beyond these cliffs could wait. Their bond, born in hardship and survival, was theirs alone, unbreakable, unshakable, forged in fire and reckoning. And as night fell, stars pricking the sky through drifting smoke, they sat together in silence, hands clasped, breathing in the scorched earth and pine. The cabin, battered but standing, held witness to a love that would survive everything: storms, hunters, fire, and fear itself. They had fought the blaze and emerged alive, and in that crucible, discovered a truth more enduring than stone. Whatever came, they would face it together. Autumn swept through the valley with deliberate grace, painting the cliffs and meadows in molten gold, crimson, and the deep russet of dying leaves. The river glinted like liquid silver in the morning sun, winding quietly through fields now dusted with the first whisper of frost. The cabin, weathered but resolute, stood among jagged pines and rocks like a monument to endurance, a testament carved from months of struggle, fire, and whispered devotion. Its logs bore the memory of storms, fires, and countless nights spent wrapped in mutual vigilance and fragile trust. Inside, the mountain man and the heroine moved with a rhythm born of shared life, silent understanding flowing through every motion. She stirred the morning coffee, hands wrapped around the tin mug, steam curling like ghostly fingers, while he chopped wood, each strike deliberate, echoing across the crisp valley. Their laughter rose like water over stones, unexpected yet natural, filling the space with warmth. The lines in their faces softened in the light, eyes reflecting mutual respect. Affection deepened by trials survived together. Children now ran through the meadows, their voices mingling with the rustle of dry leaves and the song of the river. Small feet pressed into damp earth, leaving prints that would one day fade but carry the story of a new generation. Laughter, hope, and the living continuation of a bond forged in solitude and survival. The cabin no longer merely sheltered them. It became a nucleus of life, a home infused with memory, resilience, and quiet joy. Outside, the wind stirred the trees in gentle waves, scattering amber leaves across the ground. The river whispered along its banks, carrying the sound of their lives in soft currents, while sunlight struck the cabin roof, glinting off rough wood and catching the smoke rising from the chimney. Every element, the crisp air, the scent of pine, the faint tang of wood smoke, seemed to acknowledge the transformation. What had begun in fear and uncertainty had blossomed into permanence. Rooted in trust, toil, and love, their love, once fragile and forbidden, was now sanctified in the simplicity of daily existence. There were no grand declarations, no desperate gestures, only the quiet promise of being present, of caring, of enduring. Former enemies had faded into memory. The bounty hunters, the storms, the fire, all had left scars, yes, but these were not wounds, only reminders of survival, proof that their bond had endured the harshest tests. Each glance, each shared meal, each laugh, each brush of hands across a countertop carried meaning, unspoken yet understood. He carved a rough name into the cabin's door one golden afternoon. The letters uneven yet deliberate, her name, permanent, visible, a declaration for himself and the valley that she belonged here, with him, and nowhere else. She rested her head on his shoulder as he stepped back, eyes tracing the jagged horizon where sun and mountains met in a blaze of molten color. Their breaths matched in calm, deep rhythm, The silence filled not by emptiness, but by presence. The children's laughter drifted through the open window, mingling with the wind as it rustled the trees and carried the scent of pine and autumn soil. The cabin creaked gently, alive with memory, life, and the unspoken bond that had transformed two broken, isolated souls into a family. Every wall, every log, every shadow held echoes of past trials, but the echoes were soft now, harmonized with the melody of daily life and the resilience that had carved their legacy. The sun dipped behind the distant peaks, casting long shadows across the valley, turning the world into a palette of gold, crimson, and indigo. In the fading light, they stood together outside the cabin, hands intertwined, bodies close, a quiet promise etched into every glance. No words were necessary. The seasons, the valley, the river, and the cabin itself bore witness to a love that had been tested, battered, and finally sanctified. And as the night stretched across the valley, stars pricking the deepening sky, they remained there, shoulder to shoulder, breathing in the calm, feeling the pulse of the land beneath their feet. Life had taught them its cruel lessons, had carved scars into their flesh and souls, yet from that crucible of suffering and endurance had emerged clarity, peace, and a love indestructible. The cabin, the valley, and the mountains held the weight of their story, a story no longer of trauma, isolation, or fear, but of redemption, trust, and the quiet, enduring power of a bond forged in hardship, nurtured in patience, and made eternal in devotion.